Hey everyone, so I am back with another video for how to make worship flags, and in this particular video we're going to go over how to mix your dyes for dyeing your flags. And today we are only going to be talking about fiber reactive dyes, and in another video we can go over acid dyes, French dyes, paints, all of those other types of mediums. But today we're going to go over, like I said, we're going to go over fiber reactive dyes, and I have two different brands. One brand is Dharma Trading Company, so we have this particular brand that we'll be using, and we also have Jacquard, and I mix the two together. They're both, fiber reactive dyes, so I mix the colors and it works out fine. So when you're making your dyes, you want to make sure that your hands are covered and you have gloves on your hands, because I can't tell you the amount of times I have worked with dyes thinking, I'll be real careful, there's not going to be an issue, and then the next thing I know, I'm going out to dinner because we've already made plans with purple hands, and it's not cute at all. So anyways, cover your hands. And that also goes for the rinsing portion. When you're actually rinsing your silks out at the end, you probably should wear gloves then as well, because some of that dye can still transfer to your hands and it does not come off real easily. It can take a couple of days to get that off, especially around like the nail bed. It just isn't cute. So today we will need to have some water, which I already have that. We are going to be using citric acid. It is a food grade citric acid. You can get it on Amazon. I'll try to remember to put links in the description below. If I don't put links, remind me, and then I'll go back and do it. Of course, we've got our dyes that we're going to be using, and I have measuring utensils. So we have measuring utensils here. We have some really small ones and then kind of some larger ones, because I'm going to be making a larger flag. We also have containers to put our dyes in. We also have plates just so that I can color swatch. And I also have color swatches that I highly recommend everybody do before you ever start working with your dyes. So these are, hopefully they'll stay on here. These are my swatches, and I know what order they're in, so it doesn't confuse me, but this is a list of everything on that paper and in order, and it basically says how many teaspoons per 3 ounces. So if I'm going to be making 6 ounces, I would double the recipe. And I use this because I know what color I'm going to be getting. So if I want to use a black cherry, this is the black cherry that I have here. And then this is my antique gold, and then my lemon yellow, my fuchsia. So depending on what I want to use, I know according to the recipe what color I'm going to be getting if I follow the recipe. If I want it darker, of course, I could increase the amount of dye to the water, or if I want it lighter, I could decrease the amount of dye to the water. But I highly recommend that so that you always know what you're getting when you're mixing your dyes, so that you're not surprised each and every time and have odd results each time. Now, I personally do not use a recipe for my flags. I hand make dye for every single flag, and I have an idea of about the ratios, but I don't actually have a recipe for certain flags written down, because I like for those to be individual. I like for them to be 100% unique, and nobody to ever receive a flag that is very similar, especially when I'm making flags that are kind of in prophetic nature. So anyways, I did not bring my scissors over here, but I'll grab some before we get started. Basically, you need to have some scrap pieces of silk, and that's what I need my scissors for, just to chop this down a little bit smaller. But when I make flags, a lot of times I cut chunks off of the edges, as you've seen in some of my previous videos when I'm making flags that have like frayed edges. And so these would be like some of the pieces that I've cut off for my frayed edges. So if you're doing that, don't toss these little guys away. Hang on to these, because these are really good for making sure you're getting the exact color you want out of your dies. So let me grab some scissors. I'll chop up some of this silk, and then we will just get started mixing up this dye. Okay, so I am starting with, this is 4 cups of water, and I have a lot of water here because I have several containers that I want to fill, and it's just easier to mix one whole batch of water and make small little increments of color. So what I'm doing is, for every cup of water, I use a half of a tablespoon. And so I have 4 cups of water here, and I have a tablespoon measurement. So I'll use 2 of these. And then I will just stir that until it is completely dissolved. Okay, so everything's mixed up. It was mixed in hot water, not super, super hot, but as hot as your tap will go. And that helps dissolve it super quick, but it also helps to dissolve the dyes that we're getting ready to do. So I'm gonna use a large container for my turquoise, because I'm going to make a set of 2-layer flags, and I need a lot of dye for that. So I take the water that has the citric acid in it, and I'm only gonna fill this up because I know I'm not going to fill it all the way up, because I know that I need to leave some space, because the powder dye is actually going to increase the level of the water some. So then I take that, and I'm going to transfer it into a solo cup so that I can mix my dyes in there. And then I'm just going to mix. So I have my turquoise. Now, if you're working on a surface that doesn't wipe clean, I would highly recommend you put something down to protect your surface. This plastic white table will clean up quite well. So always start with a little, and you can add gradually. You can never take away. I already know how much dye I need in my project, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in. However, with this particular set of flags, I'm going to be adding a little bit of medium blue, as well as possibly some indigo blue. It really just depends on how it turns out when I put the medium in. So basically just mix it in there. And you're going to stir it until it is completely dissolved. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but just take your time. Make sure it's completely dissolved before you pour it in your container, because you don't want little spots showing up in your project later. Okay, so the turquoise is mixed. This is turquoise plain by itself. So this is my little spare piece of silk. And then just wipe it off on the edge. Get all that excess water off. And then this is essentially the color you will end up with. Now, I will say with this particular color, I get a lot of runoff sometimes, so it will fade out just a little bit, but that is essentially the color you'll get. Now, like I said, I wanted to darken this up a little bit with some medium blue. And so I'm going to add some of that to my mixture. And this is a super dark color, so I like to go in little increments. So this is a 1/16 of a 1/16. So just a tiny bit. And then we'll look and see what it looks like once we get all of this mixed in. We'll compare it to that color and see how I like it. And we may add more, or we may be good. Okay, let's see if that gave us the result we were looking for. Got a bunch of bubbles. Yeah, I'm still not seeing the color that I want. So I think I'm gonna add, actually, this larger one and go ahead and add another 1/4 of a teaspoon. So that's the beauty of the dyes, is you can add to it, like I said, but you can't take away. So I really want to take these up at this point and kind of give myself a new space to work with, because I know what color I want it to be. All right, hopefully this lasts. You can see I've been mixing the mess out of this. It's so bubbly. So hopefully this gives me the color I'm looking for. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And let's see, I'm sure you can tell with this one. So can you see the difference in the color? This is what we started with, and this is where we ended up. So it's not a huge difference, but it is darker and less kind of eggy, robin eggy blue. It's a little bit deeper of a color. I hope you're able to see the difference. Anyways, so yeah, that's what I'm looking for in my color. And so because I have the color that I want, I will actually transfer this color into this bottle. You can buy these bottles on Amazon. They are just condiment bottles. Okay. And that, my friends, is how you prepare your dyes for your silk fabric. Okay, so that is how you create your fiber reactive dyes for your silk fabric. Some people, instead of using citric acid, will use what's called soda ash. I don't necessarily recommend using soda ash because it can be very harsh on your silk and can cause your silk to not be as smooth or pretty. It can cause it to look more textured, and it can really kind of eat away at your silk. And if you're not careful and you put too much in or leave it sitting for too long, it can actually eat holes in your silk. So I do recommend using citric acid. Now you don't have to use citric acid because fiber reactive dyes, actually the dye reacts with the fabric in and of itself, and it will dye the fabric without heat and without the additives of citric acid, vinegar, or soda ash. However, citric acid, soda ash, and vinegar all help to bring more vibrancy to the color on the silk and help the silk to retain more of the color, as opposed to kind of letting it wash and rinse off and cause it to kind of lighten up in the rinse cycle. yeah, so that's how you make your dyes. I am going to go ahead and finish up mixing the rest of my dyes and get started on this 2-layer flag that I have. And when I get started for that process, I will start another video and I will show you guys how I dye 2-layer flags. Many different ways to dye, but I will show you one way that I do dye. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave those below and I'll see you guys soon.